All right, so our next agenda item is student achievement and results, and we're going to be hearing from Dr. Joan Blakey and Dr. Gary Williams on the student survey and reflections from African American students, a focus group, and the final report and recommendations.
So you will.
Yeah. As part of our work with our diversity work group over the last 2 years, we put forward an idea to be able to do a study with our African American students, family, and alumni to look at the experiences that students were having as a way for us to build some supports and be able to move forward with helping students have more success at school. So that was something that we had talked about a year and a half ago, I think, was the first time that I had met with Dr. Blakey, Dr. Williams, and Dr. Newby from UWM. So I'm happy to report that we've had a successful study completed, comprehensive study, and just ask them to walk through, I think, just some of the dynamics of what the study was, kind of driving questions, and then some of the things that we found, and maybe some recommendations that you have as we're moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to acknowledge Emmanuel Ngui, who is not here. He's at the public health conference, and he could not get back in time for the meeting, but he was an integral part of this project. So thank you for having us. It's nice to kind of come full circle we were before we started the meeting, and now we're here just kind of wrapping things up. I wanted to kind of start by saying that I feel like this was a great opportunity for me. I feel honored to have been a part of this study. I think because the students and the parents and the teachers and the administrators trusted us with, I think, a sensitive topic. You all supported this study, not only financially, but there were no restrictions at all. You gave us full access to everyone, and I think that speaks volumes. I think that being proactive about this and wanting to do something about it, and then putting money behind it and support behind it, you all to be commended for that. I think that what we tried to do in this study was talk to all the major stakeholders. So we talked with students, and we did a total of 9 focus groups with students, so 3 intermediate and then 6 with high school students. We talked to a total of 51 students in all of those groups. We interviewed administrators as well as staff, so counselors, principals, assistant principals, any kind of staff, so 13. We also had 3 focus groups with parents, and then we did a survey with teachers and ended up surveying about 44 of the teachers. And so again, we tried to look at this from multiple angles. Again, we were hired to really try to look at it, understand the experiences of African American students in the district. And so I did the qualitative part of the study, and then Emmanuel and Gary did the quantitative part of the study. And so I think overall, whereas we came into this thinking perhaps the problem was or lied with African American students, and that maybe that was the reason why they tended to be have some academic challenges, as well as being more likely to be referred to the office. That's sort of kind of where we started. We have ended with really feeling like the problem is this sense of belonging, and that they don't feel a sense of belonging in this school. They don't feel a sense of belonging in the larger community of Shorewood, and that pretty much messages at every level reinforce them not feeling, a part of this school. So, and one of the students, you know, they feel like a visitor in this school. They don't feel like it's their school. And I think that, again, many of the things that we found, reinforce that. So I think that's overall the kind of the overall finding, of the study. I mean, I think there's other pieces of that. And we looked at, in the study, we did recommendations. Teachers had recommendations and a lot of things to say. I think from the teacher's point of view, they a lot of times did not feel that they were always knew when to, like, how to sort of deal with certain challenges or behaviors in the classroom. I think that they would be the first to admit that, yes, they probably just said, okay, go to the office and we're done with it. I think that they were really feeling like, you know, we would like more, like, what kinds of things should we be dealing with, and can we have some training on how to deal with certain things or handle certain things in the classroom, and which things then should we then be referring to the office. So I think that was kind of overall the teachers. I think the students had a lot of recommendations themselves about things that they wanted. I think, you know, again, overall, they wanted to just be treated the same. They want no better, no different. They were just saying being treated the same. They wanted the opportunity that there were, a lot of times they didn't feel that they were able to speak or explain their sides of the story or explain what was happening. They wanted that, having teachers that represented them was really important to them, and they, you know, talked different ways that wasn't just about having a body that looked like them, but what that represented. And it represented many different things for them. What else?
Well, I guess I'll back up a bit. Overall, for talking to alums and students, teachers, it's interesting that the folks who identified the problem also identified the solution in both groups, students as well as teachers. Much of what we saw was systemic. Alums were clear about their past experiences here. Those experiences were similar to the students you currently have, the ones that we talked to. So you're talking about some systemic issues. Many of the teachers, as Dr. Blakey said, were looking for guidance, direction, support in the classroom, as well as how to deal with issues. They wanted policies and practices that were clear and concise, and that they didn't have to worry about whether or not they were interpreting those rules correctly. The students, as Dr. Blakey said, this sense of belonging. You know, there's something in education we call a hidden curriculum. Mm-hmm. And that was part of it, and that hidden curriculum are those attitudes, behaviors, and values that you learn in addition to the content, the math, the English, reading, science, all that. And it was clear that that was part of what they see happening here. And so as Dr. Blakey said, the experiences were not unique when it comes to students of color in a predominantly white school district, not unique. The fact that we've seen these behaviors in other districts with similar student composition bodies and so it wasn't new to us. The students appreciated us listening to them, not just hearing them, but listening to them. That was our way of being respectful and valuing them. They said that was not happening enough. So there were things like that we encountered as we talked with students and your faculty and alums as well. And then I'm sure more of this will just pop in our heads as we talk this evening. But overall, I think, you know, it's interesting. One of the things that students said, and the parents did too, what are you going to do with this? Is this going to be another one of those warm and fuzzy, touchy-feely reports that gets shelved someplace? and then we'll do this again in another year or two. We assured them that no, that what they should do, and we said this to the parent groups, both groups we talked to. After the dust settles, read the report, and ask for a meeting with the superintendent. I mean, you know, you wanna know what's going on, the timetable, status, implementation of these things. Meet with the folks who are responsible for doing it, hold them accountable for the work that's been done, because they have a responsibility in this as well. So it was a very valuable experience, I think, for everyone, and that's why the folks involved were very forthcoming with us.
Can we ask a question?
Oh, sure.
I'll start. So I know Dr. Blake, your research is in trauma. And so one of the things that I want to just confirm is that the results from the ACEs test suggested that there was no difference, right? If I'm reading this correctly, in trauma between both white and non-white students, and then also resident and non-resident students. Okay, so that was kind of that was one piece of information, and then the other was then when teachers were surveyed, they had a very different perception of trauma. And so can you, and their perception was that it was much higher with the African American population. So do you have a sense of, like, can you speak a little bit to what you think this disconnect?
Yeah, I think that trauma sometimes, I mean, it's the new buzzword, and a lot of things get blamed on trauma. And so I think that the ways in which we understand a lot of things that our students are exhibiting here could look like the effects of trauma. Mm-hmm. I think it wasn't until we dug deeper that we realized, no, it's about this sense of belonging that is happening. I think the disconnect is between the teachers and the students in terms of developing a deeper relationship and a deeper understanding. I think that kids overall felt that the teachers didn't really want to know them in a deeper, more meaningful way. Again, I'm speaking in general, overall. Certainly there were teachers that they did and that went out of their way to connect with them, but in general, students felt that teachers weren't interested in getting to know them in a deeper way. Certainly weren't interested in kind of going that extra mile, that if they were struggling or if something was happening, it was up to the student to initiate that, to reach out to that teacher, to seek out help. That it wasn't like the teacher came to them and said, I see you're struggling, what can I help you with? That, for the most part, was not happening. So I think that in lieu of any other explanation, it's easy to sort of blame that, okay, it's trauma. I think that sometimes some of the kids would say that, particularly, it was assumed and that they all kind of came from Milwaukee. And so again, they had their ideas about Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's dangerous, and the hood and all that kind of stuff that was being said to them at different points in time. And so I think that there was this belief about who they were that wasn't true. And so I think, again, in because the teachers weren't reaching out and getting to know them in a deeper way, that was where the disconnect was.
And let me give you another twist on that, implicit or unconscious bias. It's at work in many of these situations. They're seeing these kids through a lens that's different from those kids' experiences. So that lens suggests that there's something wrong with that behavior, because these are African American kids, this is a European American lens in my own personal experiences. So that implicit or unconscious bias kicks in, and all of a sudden I'm looking at behavior that, while the kids are fine, the behavior looks abnormal to that person.
I wish that we would have I appreciate all the work that has been done. And I want to remind people that this was a study that was going on long before the last couple weeks.
Yes, absolutely.
And how I kind of wish we would have been in September, we would be in a different place, changing positions. district. And I think you're right, that some of the solutions are identified by the voices and the problems that were identified. Part of what I've been struggling with over the last couple of weeks is even if me as a board member is fully vested and committed to changing things, so much of this and so much of what the kids reported was outside of the district and what we can control. So even if we, the five of us, have, say, yes, this is a priority and we are doing this, so much of it, because we're in the people business, education is about people, we can't control every person and all of those biases and all of those things that we carry around with us. So given all those things and all those competing things that are going to influence how we can be successful in implementing some of this, how do we, as a predominantly white district, move past that?
Move past.
Move past the biases and the individual sort of hang-ups that everyone in society has, right? Because like I said, I think if nothing else we've noticed over the last couple of weeks, that this is, a number one priority. I think it has been for the board for, in some respects, a while. I remember before I was even on the board, asking what was the biggest issue the board was facing, and it was dealing with the achievement gap. And the achievement gap is so much bigger than the data, it's so much bigger than what we get in our reports, right? It's all those beautiful faces of kids everywhere. So I guess all the, there's factors that play into here and how successful we are. And so I'm looking for your advice on how to make us have the best possibility of success in implementing some of these things, given some of those influences are huge.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think, the world in which we're living in right now, we can't control that sort of the larger world. I don't know that necessarily, I think, all of you live in the district, so I think that, you're a part of this, larger Shorewood community. So I think you do have some piece, of that. But, I think that we have to focus on what we can control, and what we can control is what is happening in these buildings and, in this district. And I think that, that would make a huge difference in the lives of these students. Parents purposefully chose this school. They, in many cases, are making sacrifices for their kids to come to this school because they want their children to have the best chance and the best education possible. And I think that is, a huge plus. The kids talked about the fact that, their parents will sit them down from sports, if they're not getting a 3.0. They don't care what the school district's, standard is, that their standard is 3.0 or better, or they can't play, and that was sort of in general. But I think that what we can control is this experience. And I think, had you asked me before this study, would I think that a sense of belonging would have this profound of effect on students, I probably would not have said. Yes, all of us have been visitors in someone else's house and feel a little like, of course you feel kind of welcome, but you kind of don't, and you want to make sure that you're on your P's and Q's and you don't do anything. So all of us have felt what it's like to be a visitor in a place, but to hear from them, their voices, and it was pretty much every single focus group we did confirmed this sense of belonging is real. And I think the sense of belonging ends up coming out in different ways, feeling like there's no safe space for them in this school at all. So imagine being in a school, in a place 8 hours a day, and nowhere can they go where they can just be. I was telling Brian that I think sometimes we think of their behavior, the separatists, or them being together at lunch, and why are they separate from everybody else? But what I came to was that this was how they navigated white space. This was this one time in the day that they could just be. They didn't have to explain anything. They didn't have to, if they told a joke, everybody pretty much got it. They didn't have to sort of, well, what do you mean by that? Or they just could just be themselves. And it was necessary. They needed that hour or whatever it was to just, be able to make it through the rest of the day. And so it wasn't that they didn't want to be with their white counterparts, but that it was just really a strategy that they used to navigate this space. And so I think, again, when they talked about the teachers and seeing different teachers and what that would mean to them, that seeing teachers would serve an example of what they could be. Again, when all the black faces that they see are in sports or in lower ranks in the school, it doesn't give them the idea that they can be a professor, right? Or that they can own their own business or whatever. And so they talked about that. They talked about just having someone that understood where they were coming from and understood their experience, and that in some ways could translate or could be that intermediary between them and the teacher that could say, no, this is what this means. So the having a face that looks like them it meant so much to them in so many different ways. So again, to answer your question, I think that, I understand what you're saying in terms of the larger community. I understand that we have no control over that piece, but I do feel that you all have a lot of control over what happens in this building, in this district. And I do think that there's things that you can do. It's gonna take some time, I realize that. I think this was the first step, and this is really where the work begins. You have the results, you have their voices, they've told you, what their experience is and how they feel. And so I think that, now it's about creating a plan of how do we begin to tackle some of this.
And let me reiterate what Joan said. Safe spaces, safe places. That's what you can do on the campus. The other thing that Dr. Blakey said, which is important, it's the same message that I pass along to students on the college campus. 1,700 African American students on a campus of 26,000. When I talk with those kids, I make it very clear to them that it's okay to insulate yourself by coming together as a group in safe spaces. Black Cultural Center is one of those safe spaces or places on the campus. So that's good. That's a good thing to make certain that you insulate. That's the insulation that they need when they talk to each other and reinforce what's going on and experiences and things like that. But at the same time, I say don't isolate yourself. Insulate, but don't isolate. College is a one-time experience. This is an opportunity to learn about people who are different from you. So don't isolate yourself from them. Learn, talk, have relationships, do all those things, and at the same time have that safe space, safe place, and insulation that you need in order to be successful in that environment.
So, I gotta get my mic to work. I'm gonna borrow Brian's. Again, on behalf of the board, thank you very much for the work that you've done on our behalf and for our students, all of our students. You talked about the teachers wanting guidance, protocols, and I know that there's not a singular answer. There's never a silver bullet. There's not a always do this, right? You have to meet every student where that student is. So this is a lot of work and a lot of nuance and a lot of art and probably a lot less science than we'd like it to be. I'd also like to know in the conversation that you had with the teachers, did you get a sense from them? There's been some professional development work done with RaceWorks and then this year on this idea of sense of belonging. Did they talk about that at all? Has that been helpful? Has that, I'm just trying to get a sense of, with the things that we've done already or that are underway, is that making any difference at all from the work that you've seen?
Yes. I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that, there's always gonna be people who don't want to, don't see the need for that. But I think there's a lot of teachers that felt that it is helpful, that these dialogues and these discussions are helpful, that Brian brought in people last year to help work with, the teachers, and they found that incredibly helpful. We were at the one for MLK, over MLK Day. We were there pretty much the whole day, with them, and, Dr. Aaron Winkler from UWM and some other people that Brian brought in throughout the day, were great. And we also were part of those groups and got into the smaller groups, and, the teachers were, talking a lot and going through sort of the exercises and participating in that. Again, were there some people who felt like, yeah, I'd rather be at home doing something else? Yes, there were. But I think the overriding sense was that they did find it helpful, and that they were talking about it. It was sparking conversation. It was sparking them to think differently, to think about what was happening. But again, it's a one-time thing, and I think it's something that has to be, obviously ongoing discussions. And not, I think that, and again, what we were trying to do is bash people or say, I don't think that these teachers, for the most part, are ill will or we didn't get that sense. I think that, what's being required of teachers is changing. What's, the things that they need to do to meet the needs of these students is changing. And I think that, they're needing training and skills around how do we do that. So to answer your question, yes, I think that it is working and it is helping.
Yeah.
And you do have teachers who as Joan said, they get it. What you need to do is identify them, and so that they're able to infect their peers, okay? Because that works, peer pressure works. And if you are able to identify those folks and say, why don't you talk to your neighbor there? I think that will go a long way to moving the needle in many of these areas.
Well, I think with anything, that early adopter idea,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I think
And
somebody who's
champions.
tried it,
Yes.
champions.
Absolutely.
And I
Right.
see that it's not been as horribly difficult as I was afraid it was gonna be, or whatever, and then I'm more inclined to try it, and then I have a
Right.
support person, so, yeah, I think that's
Absolutely.
very true.
And I think part of this is characterizing this is not just about helping African Americans. I mean, we are living in a multicultural world. We're living in a world that's not, that's changing every day. And I think that, exposing white students to, different ways of thinking and different ways of seeing the world, it will serve them as well. So this is not just about, changing things for African American students. I think it's about, getting everyone a better education.
Intercultural competence. That's what I use with my students who hate working in groups. But that's what my classes, 3 to 5 students in a group. Oftentimes they will want to select their friends. I will say, no, we're going to do this randomly. The goal is to try to work for a goal across those differences. And intercultural competence, that's the way of the world.
Right.
It's the way the real world works. So it's a struggle. And they're going to be uncomfortable, but that's okay. So, if you keep that in mind when it comes to working with teachers and students alike, we'll get there.
I think one of the biggest challenges, and I want to reiterate what my colleagues have said, thank you for the work you've put into this, it's fantastic. I think one of the biggest challenges for students of color is that they navigate various worlds. And there is often an underappreciation or just a lack of knowledge from the dominant culture that folks are, in the words of Du Bois, double conscious, or Boykin, the triple quandary. And I'm wondering if you saw any of that kind of filter in, and I'm thinking that those types of discussions are necessary to have at the staff level as well, to kind of garner a greater appreciation for the worlds that are not only African American, but our Latino and all of our students who don't fit in the dominant framework navigate. And I'm wondering if you saw evidence of that. I mean, I saw this as evolutioning past your recommendations and kind of assuming that, but did you see some of that in your, especially in your focus groups and your interviews, did some of that emerge, that constantly navigating two different worlds and having expectations from this group and that group, and then a lack of appreciation from the staff, the district, us, for those differences?
Yeah, but I think it also, I mean, they're tired. I mean, it really, yeah, it is exhausting. It absolutely is exhausting. And so I think that it was just always having to do that. And then I think the parents, certainly the parents in the groups that we talked to, and then the students also talked about their parents kind of, arming them and preparing them and, kind of continuing to remind them that, you're Black and this is what this means and, go this, do this, please stop you, do this, it was all of that. But I think that overall the students felt tired a lot of the time. Like it's exhausting to have to do that. And I think again that's one of the symptoms of this sort of not belonging is when it is this sort of exhaustion that happens as a person of color having to kind of always navigate those spaces. And that's why when they were with their peers, not having to do that was so, was nice. It was just a break that they could just be and not have to do and decode and all of that kind of stuff.
One of the findings that I found quite astonishing in terms of the referral rates that we'd seen, if you looked at what you shared about teachers' perceptions at the intermediate school, teachers' perceived manifestation of student trauma experience. According to teachers, they identified behaviors that are more likely to exhibit, where they're more likely to exhibit aggression, yet there's a disproportionate amount of young African American boys being referred to the office, although the teachers have already identified and said white students tend to display these more aggressive behaviors. So I'm looking at this going, wow, there's a huge disconnect. And I don't know if you all caught that in the study, the report, but that was, what were your thoughts on some of those referrals and where those might stem from?
Well, for me, I went back to the report that Eric Holder and Arnie Duncan did in the Obama administration when they were looking at the zero tolerance policies around the country. And they examined the policies and suddenly found that there was this disproportionate number of Black and brown boys being referred. And one of the conclusions was now the school to prison pipeline begins at preschool. Because at preschool, Black and brown boys were being suspended at 3 times the rate of other kids. Now preschool, I asked my students, what does a student do in preschool to be suspended? Bring a Uzi to class? I mean, I didn't get it, but they said, well, it depends on the person observing the behavior and how they interpret that behavior, whether they view it as not assertive, but aggressive. And then you go to the office. Well, that again is that lens through which they're examining this behavior. So yeah, it makes sense. Those guys, they looked at the zero tolerance policies around the country and said, hey guys, you need to rethink this and the flexibility or latitude you have with these policies, because what you're doing is disproportionately, for similar behavior, like you indicated, but you're sending these boys, Black and brown boys, to referral or suspension.
According to the data, sorry for interrupting it, the data suggests that teachers perceive white students to exhibit more aggressive behaviors.
Right.
But referred less.
Right.
Right,
But I
yeah.
think it goes
Yeah,
back to the
so it's
relationship,
acceptable.
right?
Yeah.
If I understand, if I know you, then, and maybe I do know that you're, going through some tough times,
Right.
I'm more likely to give you a break.
Right.
I'm more likely to say, okay, his behavior is because, he's struggling or whatever. I'm so more likely to do that. And so I think that's where the relationship to me matters and is important, because when you have a relationship with your kid, you understand, okay, you're maybe likely to be more lenient or more understanding of behavior than when you don't.
But to have those relationships, you have to have a dialogue. You gotta talk to these kids. The only way I mean, you talk about in education, we always talk about meeting kids where they are. Part of that is the dialogue that you have with them. So that you build a relationship, you build trust. Now we can move forward. You have to take the time to do that. It's uncomfortable at times, and it takes time. But you have to have that if you're gonna make a difference in the lives of many of these kids.
Because I think a lot of them talked about, it's not that they can't hear, like, some of the teachers would say something to them and, they didn't necessarily like to hear it, but because they had a relationship with them, they could hear it and they took it. Versus the other relationship, it was just like it was always punitive. So it was always, focusing on the bad, and always, they felt like they were waiting for them to mess up and to do something so that they could refer them. And so I think that they talked about, some of these teachers that we know care about us and love us, they will get on us, they will, chastise us and no, we don't like it, but we hear them and we take it because we know that they love us and they care about us. And so that relationship matters.
The ethic of caring.
Can I ask about the focus groups with parents and alumni?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't see, and maybe I missed it in this, like, did they have specific, it sounded like you talked about the systemic racism and things that they discussed that had been around since they were here as well. But did they have specific recommendations that you pulled out outside of the ones that you had from students and teachers?
No, many of them were the same. Yeah, their experiences were very, very similar. There wasn't a lot of difference between them. But again, I mean, some of the alumni had been out 1-2 years, so it wasn't like it was, a long time since they had been out. And so a lot of the things that they said were the same. The parents, they certainly had things to say. I think probably overwhelming. They didn't always feel welcome in the district themselves. They didn't always feel welcome to go to events, or when they went to events, they felt isolated or felt that there were cliques and things, and so they didn't always feel welcome to be a part of that. But even in spite of those challenges, they still chose Shorewood because of the diversity. Again, they were very intentional about this. They did their homework, they did their research as to why they chose this school over another school. And the diversity was probably the number one reason why. The second reason why was just the stellar education in which students received. And so they were willing to put up with a lot for their kids to come here. But generally speaking, they did not feel welcome as parents either.
You had one of your alums actually echo something that a couple of your teachers made reference to, and that had to do with the curriculum. A culturally responsive curriculum. And simply put, it means kids being able to see themselves in the curriculum. They're heroes who look like them, images, experiences from their backgrounds and things like that. So you had teachers making that suggestion, as well as alums saying, hey, this curriculum, I mean, you could do something a little different with the curriculum. And that, again, makes kids feel that they're part of this community.
I think that cultural disconnect is the underlying issue, and you highlighted it in your research. When I taught here, disclosure, years ago, I taught at the middle school. We did a project on the African diaspora in Latin America. As a Spanish teacher, it was a natural fit. And actually last year during Black History Month, a group of students and I got together and I helped them with the drums, and they did that last year in February. But many moons ago, I did a couple big concerts, brought in a friend who was the director of Code B. We did a group, and this is just to share an example with everybody in the room of what you were talking about what you're getting at when you talk about a lack of understanding of behaviors that are not meant negatively. So we did this beautiful performance in the 7th grade, and a bunch of students immediately felt the urge to start clapping, shouting. They stood up, they started dancing. It's all right, right? Except they all got sent to the detention room for not behaving appropriately. I then spent a good chunk of time getting them out of detention so that I could enjoy the 8th grade show. Same thing happened. But the teachers in the 8th grade jumped up next to the students and started dancing with them. And pretty soon there was a big conga line, and it was a radical difference between the perception that this group of teachers had about a behavior that was completely innocuous. And when we walked out with the director of Code B, he said to me, he's like, Pablo, what were those teachers thinking? Did they think this was the European ballet? Did they think it was the Nutcracker? They were doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing. To be sitting quietly, passively was considered rude, and to do what they did. And then that trickles throughout the curriculum. So when we talk about culturally relevant pedagogy or culturally responsive pedagogy, it's basically what exists today for dominant culture students. They see themselves reflected in the stories and the narratives of students. The experiences of the teachers are very similar to their experiences, and this is the big reach. And you ask us in your results section, that's one of your big recommendations, is to move towards a more culturally relevant approach in our curriculum. And I guess I want to ask you, because I appreciate the work of, all the greats, the Gloria Ladson Billings and everybody else Gloria Ladson Billings, who kind of gave us that term. What kind of tips would you have for us as we look to moving towards more culturally relevant pedagogy? It's easy for us as a board to say, all right, now next year we want all teachers to be culturally relevant. And therefore we will wave our magic wand and it will happen. And I think this will fit in nicely with RaceWorks, with uncovering some of our hidden biases. It's a long road. But what kind of tips and suggestions do you have for us to start that or continue that path in a more sped up way?
I think it is indicated in the report between Dr. Banks' work that you highlighted and Gloria Ladson Billings' work on culturally responsive pedagogy. They give you exactly what you need. It's about a lesson plan, a curriculum, where you infuse diversity into that lesson plan, that curriculum, by the books you provide for your instruction. Now, teachers have to buy into it first, okay? And that's not easy, that's not overnight. You have to do your research and plan so that you're able to include those writings, those readings in the curriculum that you teach. All these characters have to be a part of what you teach and how you teach. Let me give you just a simple example. I was talking with some young teachers several years ago in a class, Cultural Foundations of Education class at UWM. And they were having a difficult time getting their students acquainted with, or getting students to buy into wanting to get involved in science, to read the books and stuff like that. And I said, well, first order of business, how's your room set up? Decorate, and pictures on the wall. No pictures on the wall. Okay, well, that's problem one. Number two, what books, what textbooks, who are you talking about in your, well, list a bunch of scientists and stuff like that. I said, you're dealing with African American kids, boys, girls? Okay, simple. Talk to kids. Put some pictures up around the wall. How about McNair? How about Mae Jemison? How about the Peanut Man? The Peanut Man. They looked at me, what? The Peanut Man. I said, all kids love jelly and peanut butter. Tell those African American kids there's a brother in their peanut butter. And the Peanut Man. Who's the Peanut Man? George Washington Carver. What did he do with all the things he did with peanut? Put a picture of him up, talk about what he did, and then say, that jelly and peanut butter sandwich, thank the guy on the wall there. I said, that's a way, as simple as it sounds, all of a sudden kids smile and they say, wow, he looks like my uncle, my father, they get it. They're in it. The astronauts who look like, they get it. And so you have to do, and that's the first step, is you introduce them into an environment where they can see themselves on the wall. Then you give them the material to read, where they see themselves in the textbook. And it's a long, slow process, but it's doable. And kids will get engaged in the work once they're able to see themselves.
And I think that's what I want to highlight, that what you said, which is it's a long process. It doesn't stop,
Right.
because in Banks' topology of multicultural education, that's the first, that's ground zero. That's
Right.
like the base, right? The focus on heroes and holidays and all
Exactly.
that, but that's not enough. We've got to take that next step
do.
and start embedding it, not just in a course, not just in a chapter, but in everything.
Right.
And then ultimately kind of lead to social justice. And I know the district's been working with the folks from the Southern Poverty Law Center teaching tolerance in rewriting their curriculum in social studies, so that it fits,
This stuff has to
Guidelines.
become habit.
Yeah.
You're asking people to unlearn 30 years of socialization. Right, and more in some cases, right, more in some cases. That takes hard work and sacrifice. And you're gonna be uncomfortable. So, let's have at it.
But I mean, I think also, is it possible to build that into some of the evaluation, right?
Yeah.
That
Right.
we always, I mean, can we provide incentives first, or celebrate those teachers that do
Right.
take the extra mile, who do go that extra step of including in their lesson plans, and they start to do that. I think that, unfortunately, sometimes we need to be rewarded externally, in order to do that. But if that's the expectation, that, your lesson plan is multicultural, your lesson plan has diversity, that maybe we will start to see some of that.
Could you share, those of you who, like, we all read the study, but were you able to share all of your kind of conclusions and what your recommendations are for us? Culturally relevant pedagogy was one. Working towards a sense of belonging was probably the first one. But then also increasing the diversity among, our ranks.
Yes.
So, could you share a little bit about kind of some of the research that's been done and the importance of having folks that look and reflect the student body and the impact that has on learning? Because there's some significant studies out there that I think would be beneficial for everyone in the room to hear. I know we've heard them, but I think it would be beneficial for
Well,
everybody.
it goes without saying that you're absolutely right. The research that we've been doing for some time, talking about putting folks in front of the classroom who look like the kids in the classroom. Now, having said, and we're all supportive of that, we get it. The reality is that that's not going to happen today, tomorrow, next year, in the next 5 years. Why? Because the majority of people entering and graduating from schools and colleges of education across the country are European American females. That's not going to change anytime soon. So what do we do with that? What we do is a better job of preparing them to work in those environments. We could do a lot more in schools and colleges of education in terms of the curriculum that we provide. Talking about cultural foundations of education courses, I have students in education now who say, well, they may have taken one course in that area that was saturated with diversity prior to graduating. That has to change if you're going to. Now, we cannot prepare young people for every single situation they're going to encounter, obviously. But we can prepare them for what they might encounter, and we can prepare them with the critical thinking skills necessary to look at a situation, examine it, analyze, and then talk about what needs to happen. I'm going to go back to a guy, philosopher Paulo Freire, and Pablo, I know you know his work. He always talked about, this is a guy who used to work with itinerant farmers in Brazil. I mean, he just, people who couldn't even read or write. But he realized that dialogue was critically important for those folks, all right? Because with dialogue, you establish relationship and you establish trust, and all those other things happen as a result of that. Well, that has to happen with the kids that you're working with if you're in fact gonna make a difference. You have to have a relationship. You can't, they will not learn if you don't have a relationship with them. And you can teach till you're blue in the face, but nothing's gonna happen on the other end until you have a relationship. And the interesting thing about your kids is they wanna be challenged. Your students were saying to us, up the ante, folks. All right, what is this about a grade point average of below 3.5 for sports? Make it 3.5, we'll get there. These are your African American students telling you up the ante. So up the ante. Because they are challenging you to do that. And what they're saying to you is, we can get there. With your help, they will get there. So that, you know, as I said at the very beginning, all the problems and all the solutions we heard out of the mouths of your students and your faculty and staff. And they will get you there. But again, Pablo, this is hard work. This is not easy stuff. I mean, the report is fine. We can sit here and talk about, it's hard work. People are gonna be uncomfortable, angry, and you may lose folks in the process. Okay? But it has to happen if you're gonna make a difference for these kids. Okay?
I think the other thing is that oftentimes we think about, you know, we just need to recruit more people of color, and I would say that that's true, but we often don't focus on the retention of them. So we can get them here and we can get them in the door, but can we retain them? I think that's much harder. And I think introducing them into an environment in which they're not welcome, which there's only one or two of them, that they are the ones that have to fight now, you know, this fight and do this without, you know, sort of the larger support. They get tired and they, you know, leave as well. So I think we have to also think about not only getting them here, but how do we keep them here? And how do we create an environment in which they feel welcome and that they want to stay for the long term.
You have to have a mentor for them. When they arrive here, they have to be assigned a seasoned veteran mentor who's invested in that teacher's success. That's the only way it happens. So they can point out the minefield and say, here's what you may want to think about or do differently. And that's an opportunity for them to learn from each other, actually. But they have to have a mentor when they arrive here.
Well, and we have a mentoring program in place, but I think that what you're talking about needs to change in addition to the mentoring, right? So mentoring on the old way, so to speak, isn't gonna do it. I can be a seasoned teacher, I can be a very experienced, very capable teacher, but if I'm not adapting these, a more of an equity-based lens in the way I deliver, then I can mentor all I want and I'm not gonna be effective, so they have to be connected.
Well, and I think that speaks too to what you identified by some of the teachers saying that they need additional resources, additional support. But there are teachers in the district that are getting it, right? And that the kids are feeling connected to, and that they are implementing the things that are being worked on, and all those things. So connecting teachers to existing teachers, connecting students to students, connecting, everyone needs to be interdependent in some respects to move this needle at all, because it's not just going to be one person, it's not one solution. So I think there's building blocks right there to start with, based on what we have been doing and what we need to do.
Well, and to your point about it not being easy or not being fast, no one wants to be in a position where they make mistakes. Everyone wants to do well. So people are afraid to, it's always uncomfortable to venture outside of what you're comfortable in for fear of doing something wrong, either damaging another or damaging yourself, right? So we also have to give people space to know that your intention has to drive things, right? Now, good intention doesn't sanitize a bad impact. We all know that. However, it sure helps to explain, wow, I really didn't do that well, and I need to start over, and I need to apologize and have a conversation with you about how I just maybe stepped in and need to do something different. So I think we also have to make space for our teachers to learn and grow and make mistakes. And I think it's easy to vilify people when they make a mistake, and then people stop, they stop trying because they're afraid.
Absolutely.
So we have to be really generous in that regard as well.
And we talk to teachers about self-reflection. That's important.
Yeah.
Observe what you're doing, get some feedback. Maybe, have a situation where you videotape one of your exceptional teachers in action, and then you show that video to other folks, say, what do you like, what could she have done differently, things like that. But that self-reflection is important for their growth.
Yeah, I think the teachers that came through in your report, the teachers are wanting time for more
Right.
self-reflection. I think
Yeah.
another part of the context is that teachers are, doing more than they have time to do already, keeping up with everything else. And yeah, they still want, I'm hearing that from the report and from the teachers, that they want that time to reflect and to learn new things and to do things in a different way. So there's the will there. There's a challenge with carving out the time for kind of all the professional development that all teachers need constantly to stay current in their field, to stay and to overcome these biases that some people don't realize are even there.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to give some context, so first of all, thank you again. So it's been a pleasure working with you, but you're not done yet, so we'll certainly stay in touch. Joan moved to New Orleans, so we brought her back to the cold weather just in time. But we'll certainly continue to stay in touch, and Gary's right at UWM, so I appreciate that. So just to give some context of where we're moving with these results and with this information. So part of what we're in the process of doing, in addition to our race work professional development, we've had a teacher group called the Equity Work Group that's been working through helping us plan and think through our race work professional development. So that group will be getting together over the next month or two to be able to, I think, really kind of take a pause and reflect on where have we gone over the last 2.5 years for our race work professional development, and what do we need to really do to reinvest in that. And I think now is a good time to be able to do that because of the idea of what does our calendar look like? What does our space look like? What is our investment into curricular programs? Those are things that we can plan for now and be able to work into our budgeting process and our calendaring and that type of thing. So that's a really important piece. This information from the study that we can take to help inform a lot of those conversations into the why. I think it's sometimes hard to move because it's like, well, why are we really doing this? We certainly have evidence, and we've known that from our results. This provides some voice, some context to that. So I appreciate that. So that's one thing that we'll be doing. Today I was able to sit with Tim Joyne, our Curriculum Instruction Director, and Ebony Grice, our Dean of Students, in the Student Equity Task Force that we had just put together with a group of a couple students from our advocacy groups at the high school, from our Youth Rising Up group, which is primarily African American, to Best Buddies, who help students with disabilities, to a lot of different advocacy or identity groups that we have. So that group met today to get kicked off, and what they're going to be able to do for us is provide kind of an active network, as we've described it, with them, to be able to have them review kind of what they're seeing in real time, meet on a monthly basis, and then also be able to be an outlet for teachers as like, here's some things that I'm struggling with, or I'm wrestling with, or I'm thinking of. Where can I talk to kids in a space that's not necessarily like in my classroom space, which is certainly important, but kind of beyond that. And so with the students are off of today's conversation going back to talk to their groups about this sense of belonging. That's something that they landed on. So they'll be bringing that back and then doing some prioritization of some issues that they're seeing that they can get a consensus on and agree with, and that'll help inform our practices and policies moving forward. So that's how we're beginning the conversation, around student voice, which again we've done in pockets, but I think this provides a collective avenue for kids across the high school. So we'll plant that seed and be able to work on them. And then so that's the student and the teacher standpoint. We also have kind of a parent community sense, because we have had a lot of people, especially over the last month, reach out, provide resources, and be able to help support and have that conversation. So to be able to structure what those resources look like, how does our parent development, communications with our parents, how can we ramp that up and make sure that we have better communication? So what we're doing is putting together what we're calling an equity forum that'll be probably the end of January, early February. That'll be professionally facilitated, but that'll be an opportunity for all community members to come in and kind of provide their insights and resources about what they'd like to see for the district moving forward. And then that'll be something, because of the timing of that, we'll be able to bake that into our strategic plan. So kind of an equity lens into our strategic plan with some short-term actions along with some long-term kind of aspirational visions of where we need to get to. So I just wanted to let you know that, this isn't going to just sit on the shelf, that there's spaces to where this is going to be active at multiple levels in the system, both at the students and at the teachers and at the community level. And again, not that there are three separate spaces, because we need to figure out the interaction to that, but we also wanted to be deliberate to make sure that they understood kind of the study, what are the other things that we've learned about, certainly in the last 6 weeks here in the system and in the community, and be able to use those things as we're moving forward. So again, I just want to thank you for your time and efforts. It's certainly something that's going to make a difference for our kids.
Well, and thank you, as Joan said at the very beginning, it takes a lot of courage to step out in a situation like this, given our climate in our country at this time. And you realize you have work to do. It's a long journey. You've got a lot of people who are willing to take this journey with you, and you can get it done. You've got commitment, and you've got a lot of young people who just, the energy they have. I mean, the Youth Rising group, those are kids talking to kids about being successful. It doesn't get any better than that. And so you guys are in great shape. But you got a lot of work ahead, and it's not going to be easy. Okay. So thank you.
And we'll definitely be inviting you back, I'm sure, to see how things are progressing.
Great.
So I would really appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can leave it up. All right, so up next is public comments.
Sangeeta was.
Sure. Oh, go ahead.
We
It's
don't
all
have
right.
a sign up sheet. Sangeeta has to leave quickly, so she was just gonna say something.
Can you, sorry, state your name and address.
Sure. Sangeeta Patel, 4232 Northwood. And actually, I feel really bad jumping the lines there. I did come early to ask because I have to pick up a child. But I wasn't going to speak to this issue, so I think I'm going to go and come back and try to catch the second set of comments, because I don't want to take away from this issue. I do want to say one thing about this particular issue. Growing up in an immigrant family, I definitely understand that feeling of not belonging. And one thing that I didn't hear come out in that is I think it's intimately linked with a feeling of lack of power in the system. I think even in Shorewood, I know of plenty of parents who feel, white parents, who feel perfectly comfortable walking into the principal's office and saying, I don't want this teacher, I want this, this is how I want the schedule for my child. And I don't think that everyone feels that. And I think that's very intimately linked with feeling a sense of belonging. And I'm not saying it's entirely just race related, but I think that inequities in the system are very important for to be addressed in this issue if you want people to feel like they belong here. So I didn't hear anything about that, but I think that is a very key factor. Having a person that you can go to that will advocate for you is important. So that's one way that you can bring back the power to students of color and in any students, having that ability to go and be able to feel like they can say, I don't like this needs to be changed. Every student should have that power alone and not need a group of people with them to be able to make that argument. And I think that's a key factor that's missing for what. Okay. I have comments.
What I wanted to say is, as an alumni, myself, my sister, I have a daughter, and now teachers in the district, and we talked a little bit about our linkage meeting. The big thing that I can reflect on as being a student of Atwater, the middle school and the high school, was the curriculum. And we talked about it, that typically slavery is brought up. And then at the time I was at Atwater, 3 African American students in a classroom, and we talked about slavery, and then everyone looked at us, the 3 of us. So it was either 2 black girls and a black male, or 2 black males and 1 female student. So we were always singled out. And some of the questions you were saying, like how do we bring a sense of belonging, is through the social justice curriculum. It's curriculum. And it's also through instructional practices. So I heard you reference Teach Like a Champion, but that's how you shorten the achievement gap, is through your instructional practices. And instructional practices is across gender, races, ethnic, everything. It covers everything. But when you don't have structure, so in terms of like your lesson plan template, what template are teachers using so that it's across the board? Are they using Google Docs to share their lesson plans to receive feedback from their colleagues so that it can be more culturally responsive? Also, another parent mentioned, even on the elementary level, Infinite Campus, it drove me crazy. Elementary schools do not use Infinite Campus, but middle school, high school does. So it's another gap in making sure things are more congruent. It's frustrating as a parent. And so when you talk about that, and I'm glad that the study was here or done, but this isn't anything new. This is something that's been going on for years. And so when I hear people say, it's a journey, I've been out of here since '97. So my goodness gracious, I've been on this journey a long time. And quite frankly, I am so tired of people telling us as a community, it takes time. How much more time do you need, right? So at this point, now that you have information, what are we going to do with the data and how are we going to execute it? Not telling me people are uncomfortable, and I shared this at Linkage. What I want people to understand is, if you're a parent, you can understand this. You are always a parent. Once you become a parent, you don't stop becoming a parent. You are a parent every time. My goodness, they no longer identify you. You no longer have a name when you're a parent, right? You are identified by your child. This is such and such mom. You no longer have an identity. And so what students are saying is this: when I come to Shorewood, and if I'm not making connections with my teachers, and that's Bill Dagger, right? Rigor, relevancy, and relationships. Bottom line, the 3 R's. When I come and I have an issue, do you care enough to listen? Number 1. Some teachers did great, some teachers did not. I had great teachers that would help me privately. You know why? Because colleagues made it so difficult for them to stand up for me in public that they were silenced. That should not be a culture that's okay. So you all know teachers that feel some type of way about people that look different. So what do? How do you call out people professionally, respectfully, and challenge them to grow? Because as long as we we know this teacher does this, but we don't say anything, we tiptoe around it just because of whatever, it's going to stay that way. So when we say it change, yes, you can implement change quickly, because you know, you've heard conversations, you have parents that told you specific instances of what has happened. It's not a secret, right? And that's the frustrating part as a parent. When I get up in the morning, I'm always African American. I can't wash it off. I can't sit in the sun. There is not there's not a bubble I can go to and walk into the room and not be noticed, right? So that's how our kids feel. So when we say it's a journey, it takes time. How much more time? Because our students are suffering. And it broke my heart at the high school when in the auditorium when a young boy said, "I walk with my head down." Can you imagine your child being in an environment where he or she walks with her head down, and not one teacher go to that child and figure out, how can I help you get through the day? So his high school experience is looking at a floor, is what he just told us. Not looking at the beautiful murals, not looking at the beautiful lawn care. His experience is looking at a floor. How do we not have a sense of urgency to say, you know what, we need to speed it up? Because that's his high school experience, looking at a floor. So when I hear people say it takes time, it takes a decision. Because Shore was very progressive when it came to the transgender and the bathroom, and newspaper article written, because guess what? People came together to make a decision to make sure, guess what? That group of students felt supported, felt heard. So what I'm saying is, the same urgency that we did for a bathroom to make sure a group of students felt safe, that's the same urgency I'm suggesting that we utilize as a school community to effect change. And so I think it's a great idea of getting the other clubs together, but also you have deans of students. So the purpose of the deans of students is to monitor student behavior. Then I would suggest they connect with Ebony Grice on the middle school level, and then you have a youth rising up in your elementary school as well. And so the 3 students of deans can meet on a regular basis, and then you have the 2 on the elementary youth rising up, middle school, high school, so that those students can get together as well. Because quite frankly, it does happen in elementary school in terms of the disparity and the way students are treated. And you don't have to call people out for race. It can be something so simple, being in the classroom, raising your hand, and you're just not called on ever. Or you make a comment and the teacher is dismissive of your response. And that's hurtful. And so, as we're moving forward, I'm asking that you all be reflective, and please don't say it's a journey, it takes time, because guess what? Our kids don't have any more time. They can't come to school and be re-traumatized, and then we get them home, we gotta prompt and prime them to tell them that you're wonderful, you're fearfully made, and then come back to school and have another teacher that's so insensitive. That's exhausting. You're always on a spin cycle. And I'm saying is, we don't have time to keep having our students spin. And it's just not the African American, it's all across the board. And what we're saying as a community, we want the curriculum to be reflective of everyone that we have in the school building, and not just the majority. So thank you for your time.
Good evening. Hello. I am coming on behalf of the Office of African American Affairs. My name is Nicole Brookshire, the Executive Director for the office. Address for the office is 2578 North Martin Luther King Drive, 2nd floor, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53212. Recently, Milwaukee County made the strong commitment to adopt a racial equity plan for the development of my office, which took place in 16. I came aboard in 17. One of the key things that I wanted to demonstrate countywide was our efforts to work together, but more importantly, to drive racial equity across all fronts. So I'm here today at several parents' requests to really drive the emphasis and the importance that we do treat this as an urgency, that we continue to make it a priority, because every student should be dealt with, and every day, a level of dignity and respect. And hearing that report is very similar to some of our outlying suburb schools who have yet to take that approach, who may have started on that venture, but have to continue to keep it constant, top of mind. One thing that I did not zone in on, and I did not get the full report to ask these questions, but I didn't hear where's the track, where's the vision to address the subjectivity of our educators when we have referrals going to the office. That is a permanent record on our students of color's record. And that is not going to be expunged unless we make an effort, a very concentrated effort to understand that subjectivity of that educator and how they may be more prone to continue down that track. There may need to be an intense effort to really scrutinize that data to best understand what population of educators you're working with and what additional support they may need. I'm coming here today as a support mechanism to work with the board, to work with your educators, to work with your administration, to also help support your parents of all colors, but those of the students of color as well. There's a level of concern when you're a parent. You have to be that protector when your student or your child is not being heard in the school. I've experienced it firsthand with my 3 children. And so I understand the emotion, I understand the compassion that you want different because you work in a very segregated city and we want change. And so to see your overarching result of wanting students who are leaders, that comes with the compassion, the safety, and the trust that we instill as a parent to every school administrator that sits in any school district. And so I'm here again to help support in driving what that should look and feel like going forward. But I do want the firm commitment that it's gonna be a well-grounded approach. Something that's gonna look to accountability of our educators. Something that's gonna speak to saying that we're driving racial equity to our students of all, the entire population. It's great that we have a population that needs to have a moment to feel themselves. But what does that mean for what they walk back into? And educating that student population that is not right, it should not be done. And that if there are any racial comments that's taking place, that there's severity to that, and there's a drawing the line of accountability. If that doesn't happen now, how do you look to make that messaging understandable in your policies and in your practices? There has to be a very clear understanding that we're moving into a landscape that can go one or two ways. Currently, right now, racial tensions are at an uptick. If it's been demonstrated that you have certain students that are more aggressive, that could become a safety hazard. We want to always protect our students. We need to be mindful that it may be washed off as just a racial slur, but it could come back with some different intentions that could harm more children. I take that wholeheartedly in regards to just being here as a partner, but being definitely a support system to our parents of color and how they may need it. So I'd like to leave my business card. I do have to get back home to my own family, but this is just again for me to broach the conversation to begin the partnership with the entire school district. We would be happy. We just started our own racial equity training today with our first subset of leaders. We are utilizing the YWCA and their Unlearning Racism training. One of several vendors that we're going to participate with in being able to train over probably 4,500 staff in 2019 for Milwaukee County. So we are really committed to making this a change for the future. But as Dr. Williams said, it's not just one and done. And so changing that mindset that it's not gonna be one button and we solved our problems. You have to look at your policy, you have to look at your budget, you have to look at normalizing the conversation. What I did not hear explicitly is racism. We're talking about a systemic and structural racism system that has been in existence for 50 plus, 60 plus years. We have to look at what that root is and how do we come together as a community to address those problems and making our policy changes to be applicable and equitable for all students of whom we serve. And so I'm again just here committed to again helping solve those issues. Thank you for your time.
So I'm a fifth grade teacher at Water Elementary School, 2 years in the district. So first of all, I want to say thank you because Brian made it required to, obviously it was already required, sorry. He had a sign in for the race work, so that was followed through, that I saw right away. That was really cool. I felt heard and we talked about it and that was awesome to see that change, so thanks. I have 3 things I wanted to mention. So first of all, hearing from the report, incentives for teachers who are doing culturally relevant pedagogy. That is a really cool idea, whether that's through recognition, whether that is through monetarily somehow, I don't know how, whatever it may be. But recognizing that this is something we as a district value, this is what more people should be doing, that's how you get people to take that on. And in that light, letting teachers run PD around race. So currently, would that even be a possibility? Letting teachers talk about race with their colleagues and holding a PD with people who feel comfortable. I'm not saying it has to be a requirement, but if this is something you're passionate about, I keep coming to these. So like if this is something you're passionate about, want to talk to your colleagues about, is that even a possibility? I think that could be really cool, and then you would be able to share what you know and what's working for you with your colleagues. And then the other part of the report that was about getting more people like them in front of students, I was curious if you guys have ever considered getting teachers aides, like having an easier track to get teachers aides to get teacher licensure. So different districts, bigger districts, have programs where it's like quicker licensure essentially, and I don't know a ton about it, right? But I'm curious if you guys would ever be interested in that. So if you could answer this, one, do you think that maybe letting teachers run a PD around race, would that even be something that to consider? And two, the teacher's aide question, what do you guys think?
So, I don't know the answer to the teacher aide one, I have to look that one up.
Okay.
The PD question is, something that I guess Brian can answer.
Yeah, I would say, for the PD question, that's something I think we can throw to the equity work group.
Yeah, see what they think.
And see, what the best way to do that would be. I think that would be fine as far as the, path to licensure, so that is, something that we've explored. So we actually have a teacher at the high school right now, that have been through, some of that process and kind of a return, if you will, from a baccalaureate degree to the teaching, kind of expediting the teaching licensure process. So that's something that, that we're also looking at doing as part of this arm of diversifying our staff.
Yeah.
To be able to see, you know, we certainly have, we know the value of a lot of our support staff and who are, you know, are great with students and are really connecting, and, you know, so to be able to get them into a full-time teaching role, if that's what they're interested in, yeah, something that we can do, and still maintaining that level of quality for the programming and that type of thing. So yeah, so that is part of what we have been doing, and we'll look at in enhancing that as we move forward.
Awesome. And just to piggyback off of what you were saying, you're right. Like, it is so important that we are urgent about this, that we really talk about this. And Brian, I know we were talking earlier about how peer-to-peer to discuss racism and to confront colleagues. That even though I'm a two years in the district teacher, how do I confront my veteran colleague? Hey, what you said wasn't okay, in a professional, productive manner. We really need those tools. So I hope you guys consider I don't know what kind of professional development that would be around, but experts around how to help start those conversations, can like guide those conversations, because they need to happen. I think peer-to-peer is where it's going to be. Colleague to colleague is really where the hard work's going to happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Camille. Back to my address. 823 North 2nd Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am also an alumni. I went to elementary school in Atwater in the 90s and graduated from high school in 2010. I remember you. You were so beloved, so thanks for everything. It's very interesting kind of going full circle and being a teacher now, having lived through experiences in Shorewood in a predominantly white school district. Again, this has been going on for a long time. It was back in the 90s. I did not have a sense of belonging. I had a couple of teachers who really made it a priority to connect with me, and I felt safe with them, but again, there were just a couple out of my entire lived experience in Shorewood. As a teacher, I also want to stress the urgency of now, but I also want to stress the importance of empowering kiddos at the elementary level. A lot of what we've been talking about is the middle and the high school level, but identity threat starts when they're 5, 6, 7. These lived experiences start in kindergarten. So how can we empower our kids so they can go to middle school and they can go to high school and have this sense of belonging, because it started when they were in elementary school, because they had a voice, because they could see themselves in the curriculum. I believe in practicality as a teacher, and I think that there needs to be accountability. I believe that teachers should submit lesson plans that relate to integrating culturally responsive pedagogy. I mean, when I went to school in the 90s, it was very much so color blindness, but now we need to move past that and just hold teachers accountable for having culturally responsive classrooms. And I think there should be some, accountability in the form of submitting lesson plans or meeting with the principal and discussing how you integrate multiculturalism into your lesson plans. The other point I wanted to make is that I agree with identifying staff who are very passionate about that and using them. I mean, you guys hire teachers and you're hiring a lot of new teachers. Utilize them. I mean, we serve a purpose. And use us. I mean, we are here for our kiddos, and really just invest some time into the younger kiddos and at the elementary level. So again, my points are, this has been an ongoing problem for a while. Teacher accountability, and identifying staff who are doing what they're supposed to do in terms of their school, and really highlighting those staff members and utilizing them, because I think that'll be very helpful. I would say just coming from a district where I didn't feel supported or a sense of belonging, and was kind of getting into trouble for advocating for students of color, and myself as a staff member of color, and coming to a district where we're actually having these conversations, that's great. But again, there is this urgency of now, like, we need to get it done. And I like the idea of having the youth or having some sort of youth rising up at the elementary level. I could see 5th and 6th graders being mentors for our younger kiddos. Again, if that sense of empowerment can start at the elementary level, so all kids can start to feel a sense of belonging at a really young age. So that's it.
Thank you.
So, I know we have, sorry.
Oh, it's super fast. Emily Berry, 1304 Lake Bluff Boulevard. A question, if anybody can answer. The full report isn't online or in your agenda packet. Is that going to be posted somewhere?
So currently the full report has a few things that are allow us to identify the person who said it, and so we need to go and remove those, and then yes, it will be.
Okay, thank you.
So I know we have enough of the board members, so I'm wondering if we have another presentation, or people here specifically to hear that presentation, if we should rearrange the agenda and have move to district operations first and then come back to board government.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item number 5, which is the school facilities community survey report. And so we have Bill Foster here from School Perceptions to share with us the results from our community survey. Hi, Bill.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Sure. You gonna come sit?
Is there a clicker too?
Yep.
Do you wanna give anything?
I will. All right, we're gonna see what the survey says tonight. Again, my name is Phil Paulson with School Perceptions. I'll go through this and then maybe when we're done, or actually as we go through it, if you have questions, fire away. So the survey went out in October and it looked like this. Funny.
That's weird, it keeps going on and off your
Oh.
microphone, but anyway, okay.
All
Should be
right.
okay.
And so it was mailed in October, and people could respond either online or via paper. So in Shorewood, people are pretty tech savvy, so most people did it online, but we did receive 232 paper surveys back. I think when I was here at one point, the question was, well, what's a good participation rate? What's typical? My answer was 18 to 20%. Shorewood knocked it out of the park at 31%. Great job, Shorewood. And from a statistical standpoint, we have a margin of error plus or minus 3%. And if we were to get another, if we were to double that, we might drop down to plus or minus 2%. So it's not gonna move from a statistical standpoint. The data's locked in, it's not gonna move. So it's got a very good sample and high confidence in the data. So who took the survey? From a demographic standpoint, we asked an age question. So when I look at this one, I always go to the far right and I look at the seniors. I want to make sure our seniors are well represented. We're at 16%, which is very good. We also had a high percent of parents turn out for this survey. So that pulled our average down just a bit, but this is a good distribution. And when it comes to voting, this is kind of how it looks, where unfortunately our younger folks tend not to vote and they tend not to take surveys. So older folks tend to vote and take surveys. We had one question, do you live in the district? 13% of our sample do not, which raises the question, are those 13% who are taking our survey? Answer is primarily staff. So all staff were invited to participate. So that was number one. The other would be parents who choose to open enroll into the district. They might have also taken a survey. However, we're gonna remove that 13% from any funding support question because those folks won't be able to vote, but we did want to get their feedback on some of the questions that were in the survey. So you're gonna see the word resident pop up a little later in the report. Are you an employee of the district? So again, 175 folks were employees. 662 or 55% of the sample were parents. And then for the parents only, if you have school-age children, what schools they attend. And you can see, as you would imagine, we had primarily our parents. The Shorewood High School is a little bit higher because it's got 4 grade levels. And we've got a smattering down of public school outside the district, private parochial, and a few homeschool and New Horizons charter school. And then other relationships you could have with the district. So 32% of our sample had no relationships, and then there were also graduates themselves. So 30% had graduated from the district, 27% volunteer. We had some parents of children younger than elementary school age, and some grandparents that took the survey. We had one question on communication. We wanted to find out how people would like to receive information. Here we thought it made sense to take the staff out completely. And then we broke it into 2 groups, the first being the red group, which are the non-parent, non-staff. And their number one source was district mailings, closely followed by the Shorewood Today at 54%. And then third was email. For our parents, they're number one at 91% were email, the legends from the campus, and the district website. They come through about half the time for information. Another one, social media. We're always interested in how important social media is. It's 22%, so it's certainly a factor, but it's not a major factor. But it's a factor for our parents. So then we get into the essence of the survey, which really had to do with our facility planning. When we put the report together, we put the background information that was provided in the survey so people could, when you look at this report a month from now, 2 months from now, you'll be able to remember what was in the survey. There's some background information in terms of kind of the pillars of the plan or the needs that were driving the plan. We then asked the question, what advice would you give the district? Here again, you can see we took out non-residents, so this is only the residents. The thing about our sample is right now it's overrepresented with staff, it's overrepresented with parents, so to remove any bias, we broke it into 3 mutually exclusive subgroups, the first being the red group, which are the staff. 79% of our staff are encouraging the district to pursue a referendum, 62% of our parents, and then we have our non-parent, non-staff, we call those our purple people. They're really the most important group when you analyze the data because they represent the majority of the voters. So about probably 70 to 75% of our community fall into that. I don't work at the district, I don't have kids at the district, but I pay taxes. So that 55% is a key group. And the takeaway is a majority of all subgroups support the district exploring a referendum, even when you don't count in and not sure need more information. So we've got clear direction to proceed. This particular project was broken into both an operational and capital referendum. Those are 2 different funding sources or funding means that the state provides. So the first we talked about was the operational. This was specifically targeted at maintenance and testing a $275,000 per year investment to address ongoing maintenance. So we asked the question, would you support this referendum? And again, we broke it into the staff, parent, and non-parent, non-staff, and you can see a clear majority, all subgroups said yes. We've got older buildings, we understand it, so we're into the $275,000. I like data when it's clear, by the way, easier to interpret. This is easy to interpret, it's good support. We then moved to a capital referendum which allowed the district to issue a bond, potentially to pay for some major facility upgrades. We broke this into a base plan, so we worked on this quite a bit. We identified 3 parts of that. There'd be a safety and security component, an ADA component, and a building infrastructure and systems component. It added up to $55 million. And then we asked the question, would you support this? We broke it into all residents first, so we've got 70% of all residents. But again, this is kind of overrepresented with the staff and parents, so to remove any bias. We looked at staff. Staff is in at 85% with only 6% saying no. The parents are in at 74% saying I'd support that with only 18% saying no. And our most important group, these are our purple people, the non-parent, non-staff, they're in at 60% support with only 30% saying no. We don't have to go there really at all, but many times at this point in the presentation, people would say, well, how does that undecided group vote? Our experience is typically 1/3 will go yes, 2/3 will go no. So you'd maybe pick up another 3% on that 60%, and then your parents would go further. So the $55 million proposed base plan has very strong support. There were additional projects that could be considered, so we tested those independently. The first being the elementary projects, where we identified an potential investment of $4.6 million. We asked that against a prioritization scale. It could be high, medium, or low. You could see this particular item was kind of spread out. People were split between high, medium, and low with some not sures. And by the way, we're going to put this in order in just a second, but this is the raw data. We then tested an intermediate academic project plan for $2.3 million. And again, a little more, maybe leaning towards no than high, but pretty well spread out. There was the high school campus academic projects. Here we identified $9.6 million. We explained how that would be done. We tested support there, and you can see this one actually is a little bit more high than low, but not much, it's close. And then I think this is the last project, renovate, expand performing arts building. This one was $10.6 million. And here you can see this one leans a little more low than high. One more, we got one more, all right. We got the arts and science building, that came in at $8.4 million. And this one had a little more support from parents and staff and a little less support from the non-parents. Really what's going on here is we're testing 2 variables at the same time, one variable being what is it you're gonna do? You know, in this case, arts and science, and how much is it gonna cost? So people are reacting to those two things put together. So then we created this chart. This is a simple average. So if everybody would have said it's a high priority, it'd be a 3. If everybody said it'd be a low priority, it'd be a 1. Again, to eliminate any bias, we broke it into these groups of staff, parents, and the non-parent, non-staff is on the right. And even though people's averages are different, their relative priorities are almost perfectly in line, with one exception, and that being the parents think the high school art and science is a little more important than the elementary. I suspect that's because kids get older, so all kids will go through that high school. Some parents maybe have kids that are of elementary school age where it won't affect them anymore. So that might answer the question why it's a little bit different. But other than that, there's general consensus between the highest and the lowest priority. Highest being the high school main academic building, with the elementary second. Arts and science was third, intermediate was fourth, and then the performing arts building was fifth. So then we went to a funding support or tax tolerance question, where we laid out all the projects, including the $275,000 operational question and the potential capital questions. If we add it all up, we get to $90.5 million. And then we assign the tax impact, which would go from $10 per year all the way up to $151 per year. We then created a very colorful chart for you. The way this works is people could say, I'd support $90.5 million, and those folks are on the left in blue. The logic we used is, if I'd support 90.5, I'd probably support 85. And if I'd support 85, I'd probably support 75. And so on down the road, 65 and 55. So we keep going until we hit a 50% support level. So for all residents, you can see they're in at 65 million. The staff, they're in at a strong 75 million. So if it's only up to staff, we have support there, but we're not. In fact, staff is less than 1% of our community. Parents are in at 75 million, but our top bar is our non-parent, non-staff group, and they're just to 65 million. They'll support 65 million, but pushing it beyond that might be tough. But your parents will pull you up a bit. If your glass is half empty and you look from the right side of this graph, you can also say, well, how many people won't support any referendum? And you can see all residents were at 17%, and about 1 out of 4, or 23%, are non-parent, non-staff, are against any referendum. That's not bad. That group always exists. We need to be sensitive to those folks, because a lot of times those are people on fixed income and whatnot. But that's kind of how to analyze the data. So what did we learn from the survey? The majority of all subgroups and 60% of all respondents encouraged the district to explore a referendum. And then what projects should be funded? Well, the ongoing and annual building maintenance tested with support. Safety and security is important for people. The ADA compliance issues were important. The building systems and infrastructure. And then we get to renovating the high school main academic building, and arguably the elementary investment would be supported. After that, you kind of run out of money if we land at, if we ask the how much question. Based on kind of my analysis of the data, clearly there's support really for 2 questions, the first being the operational at 275, and then based on strong parent support, a logical target for the capital referendum would be 65 million. I think that is, yeah. So questions on survey?
Many people saw the referendum that passed last Tuesday. And so I guess I'd like to get your opinion about the accuracy of the survey in terms of the referendums that were passed.
Well, so, our job is always to try to come to the board and say, this is what your taxpayers want. If the referendum reflects what your taxpayers want, it will be successful. If it doesn't, it will not be. So, in the last week ago Tuesday, we had 48 questions that went to referendum. Of the 48, 48 passed. 0 failed. So, it's not always perfect, but in the last referendum cycle, it was 48 and 0.
You mean so you were involved in 48 of the surveys?
48 questions are on the ballot. We were providing data for boards to make those decisions. It's also important to note, there were 4 projects we worked on with districts, and the data was not supportive, and the districts in all 4 of those cases decided to postpone or delay moving forward. So and those are good decisions too, because obviously what was being proposed was not supported, so they did not go to referendum. They didn't fail, they didn't go. So those were 4 projects we also worked on.
How many years have you been doing this work? Approximately.
Well, we started the company in 2002.
Could you just give us an idea of the last few years and have referenda been pretty steady over the years, or have you seen an increase in the last several years? And if so, could you maybe venture to
So
say
I
why?
think back when we started, the average referendum success rate was probably just below 50%. And then increasingly, really every year, even the presidential was probably up and around 70, 72%. I don't know what the state average was on Tuesday, but it was pretty high. It was probably close to 90.
5 didn't pass out of all.
Yeah, there weren't many that didn't pass. So I think there's a couple dynamics. One is, I think probably taxpayers are beginning to realize that schools aren't funded fully. And, maybe 15, 20 years ago, they didn't understand that, didn't believe it. I think generally across the state, people are believing that. So in the case of both operational and capital, people are saying, okay, we realize we have to fund our schools. That's important to us. We're willing to do that. So I think that's happened. Other than that, I'm not sure why success is going up.
Have there been more districts going to referendum in the last few years?
There has, and I think success begets success. I mean, the other thing is people have done absolutely everything they can to cut expenses, and at some point, you're out of choices. So depending on very rural districts or in different situations in suburban districts, so there's not really one answer, but I think everybody's done about as much as they can do. They're out of options. The other thing is, right now interest rates are low, so arguably probably is a good time where most people would venture to guess interest rates will go higher. As a result, an investment's going to cost us more, cost taxpayers more, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. So maybe it is a better time. So I think some of that might have accelerated more referendums in the last couple of years than what is typical.
Could you speak a little bit to some of the districts? We obviously had a huge election last Tuesday. Most of us are breathing a sigh of relief because it means maybe less attacks on public education and its funding. Could you, several districts and very red districts in the last couple of years have gone to referendum and overwhelmingly passed. And what that indicates is that people, although they might not support policies that support public education on the whole, support their own public schools.
I think that's true.
So you'd agree with that? Yeah.
I'm not a political person, so I won't give any political editorial, but I think you're right over the target. I think it makes sense. From a platform standpoint, clearly voters across the entire state are supporting the district, so I think it makes sense to have a platform that reflects that. If you're a political person, might consider that.
So in terms of next steps for us, so a $65 million question, it's 10 million additional to the base plan that we talked about. The two projects that that people felt the most strongly about were the high school administration building and the elementary, so that's at around 14 million. So I think the plan moving forward would be to work with PUA and Myron to see, right, because those are estimates at that point as well, to see what can be done differently and what priorities can be set, because we need to make a decision. I think we should talk about it at the December meeting, really, and then put it on then we need the January meeting to put it on ballot. So we're gonna do that.
I know we might all be gone for the first meeting in January.
But you can call me.
I can call it.
If we need to make that vote. Okay, we take that vote. Okay, so we will have information, so we can bring it back to the board on the November 2017. No,
The
that's
December.
meeting.
December.
That's when we'll have the discussion.
December.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Bill?
No, I just wanna say that it was a very interesting and educational process to go through this, and really helpful, and, you're a good teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Bill. Thank you. Okay, so how about we, go through the superintendent's consent agenda, public comments, and then the Okay, so, I will take a motion for the superintendent's consent agenda.
I move that we approve the superintendent's consent agenda.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Welcome, David Winger.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we'll take public.
And thanks to, I can't even see, who left? Jake.
Oh, Jake,
Yeah,
yeah.
Jake did a nice job.
Yes. Okay, so public comments number 2. And you came back. Sorry, you came.
Took off his layer such that it's a little bit.
I have questions for him, and I intended to ask him ahead of time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Bill
I
can
mean,
hang
but
around.
you can definitely ask him. You have questions for the board?
Well, kind of both. So I had questions about the survey results, because I asked at the linkage, last week specifically about whether the results were weighted to be representative of Shorewood, and you said they were, but I didn't see in the agenda packet how they were weighted. So I had a question of whether you weighted the responses to represent the Shorewood community.
So what we did was we broke it into, I don't know if we weighted it, but we broke it into really the key subgroups in the Shorewood community, being the staff, the parents, and the non-staff.
Right, so you had a breakdown of the age group, but it's not really like the breakdown of the responses, which I wasn't sure if it included the 13% that was.
Did not, so the funding support questions do not include.
Right, but the actual response group does, right? Like the breakdown of the age includes the 13% non-resident?
Yes.
Yes, it does. So you'd first have to eliminate that too.
Well, we could, we
Right.
certainly can, but we represent the whole sample initially.
Right.
And for funding support, we took it out.
Sure, I understand that, but in order to understand what the community, response rate was, I was expecting for it to be weighted, and so I kind of did my own graph based on the red bars being the, from the 2016 census data of like what the groups that you could expect in terms of percentages in the community, and you can see that certain groups are overrepresented and certain groups are underrepresented. And so I'm wondering, what methodology you're using to account for that when you then go back with your results. I know you eliminated them, but you need to say that this, if you're gonna ultimately say this is representative of the community, why isn't the data weighted?
So two answers, great question. So really two answers. One is, the data tends to reflect who votes, not who lives in the district. So when it comes to voting, as I mentioned, people tend to skew older than younger. And when it comes to taking surveys, people tend to skew older than younger. So really, behind your question is the data predictive? And I think I answered that, just from all the surveys we've done and how predictive the final outcome is. So you could go back and you could adjust the data and weight it so it's perfectly representative, but it'd be less predictive if we were to do that.
Right, so, okay, so then the second part of it is I don't really understand what your 31 response rate represents, because if the response rate was 1,000, that means you only sent out like 3,000 surveys?
Right, I think we sent out just over 3,000 surveys.
One per household.
One per household.
There's 6,000 households.
I think we mailed just over I think that's the number, just over 3,300 or something like that.
That's not the number of households in Shorewood.
Well, that's how many we mailed.
Okay, well.
So then it was one per household. We didn't do businesses.
6,000 households, sure, 6,000.
Okay.
And and why I'm concerned is when you look at the number of responses, if you eliminate the 13%, you are now under 10% of the electorate. And then when you look at the last election, you're only at 10.9% of the registered voters and 11.9% of the actual voters in the last election. We have the 91% rate, from the last election of voting. So when you say seniors are more likely to vote than younger people, first of all, you're not representative of the seniors in your age groups, and then second of all, I'm not sure that you're comparing apples to apples when you compare different communities, and I'm wondering if you looked at that.
I'm not comparing different communities.
Right, but in this community, did you consider that it has a 91% rate of voting, and did you consider, did you look at the voting records of Shorewood?
So no, we didn't look at the voting records. So what we did was an inclusive survey and asked everyone to participate, and we presented the data that we received. And your question is it predictive? I think.
Well, yes and no. I do care about its predictability, but I also care about the accuracy of what you're presenting in terms of data and saying that it represents a community when it doesn't, right? Because then you turn around and turn to the community and say, hey, this is what our community believes. But in fact, you haven't accounted for our community.
I would disagree respectfully that we did, and everyone had the opportunity to participate. So sometimes people who don't know, don't care, don't vote, and they don't take the survey, so they're not represented.
But we do know that they vote because we have a 91% voting rate, but you only accounted for 11.9%.
Well, we didn't, we're not claiming to say this is everybody in your community. We're saying this is a good sampling that is, and we try to remove any bias from that sampling. So we're not over-representing.
Well, how did you remove the biases then?
By looking at key subgroups being the staff as one, parents as one, and not parents.
But you said less than 1% of the staff lives here. They're not voting.
No. I said less than 1% of the community are staff members.
Okay. So how much, because I noticed that the staff number was not 175, so the number of people who live in this community that are staff?
No, those are the people who took the survey. Staff is critical because staff is having communications every day with their parents, their coworkers and whatnot, so we needed to know whether or not those folks believe these projects are important.
I agree. I think we should know with the staff, but I think that's separate from what you're representing.
And that's why we broke it out.
But you didn't in the beginning, and you're not breaking it out for who actually participated in the survey, right? You're not saying how many seniors participated, because first of all, I have no idea, because there's 13% non-resident.
Why does it matter what the age group of the non-resident, non-staff is?
Wait, what?
Why are you concerned about the age groups in that last part?
But I guess why I'm concerned is that you're representing that this is what the community wishes, right? And I'm saying the respondents. Right, but the respondents are so few, and to say it's 31%.
All polling is at that number, right? Statistically,
I
if you
think
look
it's
at all the polls that come out.
So I think if you were to do I think the argument is, should we do a random stratified sampling?
Right.
And we used to do that a long time ago, and we found out it's much, much less predictive and much, much less representative. So
So-
we did not do that.
But this clearly isn't representative, right? So it's just predictive, you're saying, not representative.
Well, we can argue to what extent it is representative, we can do that analysis. But it's certainly representative of those who took the time to take the
The
survey.
survey. And we know that now, that 6,000 households, only 3,000 are.
I don't know if that's true.
And we'll check, we'll
Yeah.
double check that.
Yeah. Our goal was to mail to every household, we had high response rate, and I didn't hear any problem with mailing.
So Geeta, do you have a sense, since you've crunched the numbers and you've made a graph of what the community wants?
I don't have a sense, I don't have like an agenda on this, I just feel that truth matters and there should be an accuracy point. You know, if you're gonna say, this is what the community wants, then it should be accurate and reflective. Then you should say, well, we only got 900 community members to respond, and this is the response, right? So
So in
then
survey
turning it into
research,
percentages, your very few people are accounting for 69%.
in survey research, this is a pretty good sample, where 31% when 18% would have been
Can I jump in?
Sure.
sufficient, correct? And the other thing to note is you did have the margin of error of 3%, so it could go either way, 3%. And then we look at what happened last week, and 84 questions that you helped out with.
48 questions.
Little dyslexia with the number there. And they all fared well, so. Yeah, I'm curious as to what questions we should have had them ask that we didn't to garner a better.
Well, I think that there's
Response.
very little option in the survey, first of all. I don't think the survey gives very many options. It says 55 million, no. It doesn't explain the options very well. You've already added in the operating costs to the numbers. You don't separate that out ever as a separate option altogether.
It's a separate question on
It's a separate question without a dollar number attached to it, right? So you know that if you just have the operating and not the debt issuance, people would actually be getting a tax reduction, right? That's not ever mentioned. It's not ever mentioned that there would be a tax reduction if, that's according to the paperwork that I got.
No,
from-
there is, that paperwork is on the website. Okay, so, is there anything else?
Well, I'll let
Kate,
Kate speak to her.
And then we're gonna take a break recess, so yeah.
Thank you, sorry for jumping in, my name's Kate Nicholson, 1821 East Kenmore Place. I'm jumping in because you're talking about the sampling and doing survey. Were renters surveyed? Were they sent to rental households?
I believe so. So if there's an apartment, our goal was to put one in.
Cause they're voters.
Yeah, they vote.
I know a lot of renters, 15 of them, did not receive them. Both relatives and friends of mine. I'd like to see proof that they were sent to rental. And I think that it's really important that if there's 6,000 households, that 3,000 is not enough to get a sense of what the community will support. I would like to see proof that it was sent to rental households.
Yeah, I think we'll double check that number. If that's a mistake, then we'll have to, think about redoing it or we do wanna make sure that we're accurate.
Renters are a significant part of the.
And
we did, and we also had surveys available for anyone who didn't receive them, and we did it.
How would they not receive, how would they know to do it if they didn't receive it?
Well, if you were to tell them.
I did.
And they can call the district office, so.
And they did.
It certainly was our intention, we didn't, try to leave anybody out. It is bulk mailing, which isn't perfect, and it's the lowest cost option.
If you can provide that information, I'd be appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, David Evans, 4400 North Walker. There's over 13,000 residents in Shorewood. We only have 3,000 households. We have a person per household of, over 4 people.
I think we're gonna look into the numbers to make sure it wasn't.
Well, I think we all know we don't have, our average household isn't four people.
Correct, but that's one thing that Brian has said 2 or 3 times already.
Well, so you said if that number if you did not actually send it to the 6,000 households, then you're gonna redo the survey?
Yeah, we'll get back to people and we'll have to make sure a plan. We want to make sure that whatever decision we have moving forward is a good representation. So if we need to do it again, then we'll do it again before we move forward.
Well, okay, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious there's more than 3,000.
Right.
households.
Yeah,
We
we
can
just want
look
to
it up.
verify that.
And that we have to check that number, but.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna take a 5-minute recess.
Back to board governance. Yeah, 4. So, one of the things that I wanted to do was talk about, kind of following up on the report from, Dr. Blakey and Dr. Williams. We also, I sent you, a recommendation from, Competency about the next steps, and then we all were at that listening session at the last meeting. And I think there's a lot of things that the district is going to be putting in place. But as a board, one of the things that I think we should be talking about is how we're going to, I think 2 things, like make racial equity a priority and explicit in our policies, and then also how we might want to think about, and in doing so, then give ourselves an opportunity to monitor what's happening in the district around those things. So that's what I wanted to discuss. I think we can maybe at least start the conversation today and then talk about like how we might bring it back. So I can walk you guys through some of the things that I was thinking. Okay. I think one of the things that came up in these conversations was that there might be some difference in terms of, or something we want to look at is in OE3, which is the treatment of community stakeholders. We talk about the kind of organizational culture we want to have. And so one suggestion I had was that we add in there, we maintain, that the superintendent maintains an organizational culture that commits to racial equity as a policy. And then I think there's opportunities there for us then to look at things like our survey data of parents and community members disaggregated by race, to get at some of the things that I think have come up in terms of racial, like feelings of belonging for parents and community members on our campus. I think, at this point, so these are just ideas that we could put out there, and then we would need to have indicators for all these and definitions of them. But that was, I thought, one place that I feel like the idea that, and a place for us to kind of lift up racial equity in terms of like explicitly talking about it in terms of our culture as an organization. Okay.
I just want to say, I do think it's critical that we make this explicit. I mean, it's one of these things that I think a lot of districts maybe even assume that everybody kind of agrees on this, but I don't think that that's given enough thought. And to the extent, I think formalizing it in policy, making sure it's clear that this is a value of our district is really, it's a first step. It's an important step, but these policies then drive what
exactly
is happening in operations. So
I mean, to me, it ensures that we're looking at these things under these lens.
Right.
Like this is the lens that we're expecting to get in, like how we want to hear back from you about these. So I think that also gives us then the opportunity to, because I think there are some things, again, that have been brought up that are very much operational in terms of things that, I think Brian has to do, but I think there's other things that we can set policy that tells then, I think, everybody in our district, teachers, staff, community members, that this is what we value as a board. So
I think to Lindsay's point, if we don't explicitly state it, then it's, yes, the 5 of us might have, this is important to us, and this is good intentions, and then we change.
It's not
And
codified.
it's
not
it's not, right, it's not, so I think that's important, and I think OE3 and, committing to racial equity is exactly what needs to come after open, responsive, and welcoming.
Okay. So another place I thought we could add something was, in personnel administration, which is OE4. So, I thought we could add the superintendent will ensure all staff develop and demonstrate cultural competency. So this is going back to really everything we heard from the study
Right.
and from many of the, parents, I think, around, not just offering race works, but then also demonstrating somehow, right, cultural competency, that there's a way that we're actually evaluating that as a district. I also like the fact that this is all staff, so one of the things that I know I've talked to Brian about is that it's not obviously just teachers,
Right.
but, aides and coaches and everybody.
Right.
So that there's a place that, ensures that.
Well, I'd also like to think that I don't think we overtly do any, we don't really do any overt kind of volunteer training, but we do go through a vetting process with our volunteers where they have to have some sort of background checks, and I think it's possible for us to incorporate this into, when we ask people to serve as volunteers in the district, that we like start to just put this into everything that we do. The only way this changes is one person at a time, or a teacher talking to the parent volunteers and sharing information, and right, because those are the environments where things happen very, very unexpectedly, because there's a different combination, a different dynamic of individuals. So I think we have to look for every place where it may have an impact, so.
Okay, and then, the other one I was trying to think about is how do we ensure, that our curriculum is culturally responsive? So I thought of, two places to put it, I don't know, so one would be we put in OE10, which is learning environment, so the superintendent will, and, this was me just thinking out loud, so maintain a climate that actively addresses oppression, privilege, and isms, and is characterized by support and encouragement for high achievement. I think we already have that part in there, so I think I added the, actively addresses oppression, privilege, and isms. It's kind of getting at that social justice framework, that we've heard from parents, I don't know, again, we can wordsmith these things. But I thought, again, this is a climate one, which I think is a good one for us to have in terms of, that to me is really a space where we can have more, indicators, particularly around sense of belonging from students. Or we could put it, or we could put it in OE11, instructional programming, which is that the superintendent will ensure that instructional programming is culturally competent, or sensitive, or reflective, or.
Exclusive, I think it could be in both.
So.
They're different pieces, right? One deals with really Tim's work, the instructional programming piece, and one deals with kind of a higher level, I think, or kind of more of a cultural norms in the district, right, and behavior and conduct stuff. So it's in my mind.
That's all Tim's work, I think.
Well, yes, and that has, it could go beyond Tim's work as well, is what I'm saying, right? So if I'm a principal and I'm responsible for, oversight of my teaching staff, right, I'm gonna ensure that some of these pieces, like, there's collective accountability. So I think that we put it in as many places where it's relevant. I don't think we can overreach on this particular piece, I guess.
Right, so then, which then I think then we could come up with indicators that shows that the curriculum is reflective of our student body, and we could think about how we monitor, and it sounds like we're gonna be doing as part of SEL instruction on anti-racist, anti-oppressive language, so I think, a way for us to do that. And then the last place that we could add something, which is really us, is, something around character and citizenship, which again is really about students demonstrating cultural competency, or they talked about humility in the report. I don't know which one's better, but we could add something like that to that as well. So, were there other, so the ones that I was really trying to get at when I think about the board work is, I didn't change anything, and Lance, you had asked me about this. I didn't say anything here specifically about diversity of teachers. We have in OE4 that we will hire the most highly qualified, and then have attention to a diverse teaching force. I mean, I don't think, so legally we can't say we'll hire only people of color now or something like that.
Well, I think, at the least, I would like to understand a little bit better as a new board member, how we do try to increase the pool of diverse applicants for all the positions that come up, particularly teaching positions, you know, and if we need to do anything more there, I think that's, it's something we work with in higher education all the time, just trying to cast a net widely and get a more diverse pool, so, that's one thing we can do. And I don't know the laws beyond that on hiring, but, it's clear we need to try to attract more diverse stuff.
Well, and I think the other part of that is what Dr. Blakey said, which is about retention as well, right? So I think, so I don't know, I guess, I don't know where that would go. I think we need to, it is part of personnel, but,
We monitor people as they're leaving, right? We do evaluations on, are they leaving because of a family change, are they leaving because of a climate issue, are they leaving because of, a performance issue? So we do some of that monitoring, and this would just become another layer of that process in terms of, what are the drivers?
Yeah, it should be part of what we for.
So I think you probably have to mess around with the language a little bit. When I read a list of through, I think the ideas are all great. You probably just have to spend some time.
I mean, I guess, and then the last thing that I think, and I'm supposed to put this out there, is that I think another thing that came up, specifically, Donna, was this idea that we need to, increase our capacity towards around racial equity, and I don't know, I think we just need to think about that as a board and make it clear, maybe Brian, that we're, willing to put resources towards all of these, if we, if we're gonna change some of these and have different expectations, that we, as a board, we're gonna say that we're willing to put resources for that, because I think they brought that up as well, when they were speaking to us about how that's really important. So, thinking a little bit about that, we talked a little about the budget with the SEA, right, just thinking about priorities as a board, what's important to us. So, are you guys suggesting then that, I figure out, a time to put this into a work session, in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and include, so I think the people, the administrators that probably wanna be there are Tim and Sam.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, if we're talking about the people.
Yeah.
Sure. Right. Definitely Sam.
Based on our linkage, earlier this evening and kind of, a feeling of, just feeling overburdened and wanting to do this wisely, and delicately so that it's successful. What's that?
You can do it in January.
No, I'm not suggesting doing it in January. I'm suggesting, having, some representation from the SEA and having these discussions of who are gonna be putting in kind of, which I would hope, culturally relevant pedagogy into the teaching. I would want their full support and buy-in.
Well, I think that's our job to say, we want this as a board, we set the policy, and then it's Brian's responsibility to figure out how to make that happen in collaboration with the SEA. So I'm not saying I don't support Amy's saying right here, sorry, I never make those linkages, it's always when I'm teaching, I just want that to be on the record, Amy, so you don't think it's anything about you.
That was stated, no worries.
Okay. But I
was just late, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so in this particular case, I think this is a board decision, and if we say this is important to us, then our team, which is our staff, get on board with how to make that happen. And I don't think there's gonna be, and we have to commit the resources to it so that if it's an issue for the teachers, then we have to do that. I mean, that's part of the process, is engaging Amy and the teachers, and how does that actually happen? But, so please don't take this wrongly, but this is not a, hey, what do you guys think about doing this? If we think this is important in our role, that's our job to make the decision, and then it's time to figure out how to implement it from Brian on that. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm completely a fan of culturally relevant pedagogy. I've been for a long time.
but I am also, yeah, I guess my own gut says, let's engage with them and have this discussion about the relevance. We heard from their leadership today about the value of race works and how much it's impacted them, but I think, you know, having or the next time you have a meet and confer with them, have part there, just to be part of that discussion. So it doesn't feel like, all right, the board is giving us something else to do. Because I don't want that to be the perception either. As important as I think it is. I think looking at a strategic opinion at the answer or something like that, policy area, nor am I waiting for it. A little bit more. I think ultimately we'll get there, but I know when I can convince my son that his room is messy and get him to clean it, it's a lot more fruitful than when I just tell him, clean your room.
Honestly, I think we underestimate our teachers if we don't think they're problem through our because they're in the same space that we are, and I don't want them to feel like it's one more thing to do. This isn't a checklist item. This is a paradigm shift.
Completely, yeah.
So that's, you gotta do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess and we don't have the SCA linkage on here, but when we talk about it next time, one of the things, right, that I think became clear was just the communication one of the things I'm gonna wanna hear from Brian is like, how are they improving communication? Because it sounds like there's not a good, it's not going necessarily from the boardroom to the classroom in the way that we are expecting. And so to get a better sense of that and their participation in that, I think is really important, so. Okay. So, yeah, I'd like to, move forward with these, sooner than later, but I'll try to figure out a time that we can do that. I know that it's the end of the semester, so.
We're just kind of out of time.
Yeah, no, I think we should do it before the holidays.
So we'll see. We can push it on. Okay, and then we've had 3 linkages so far. So Lance, you want to talk about Going Connects, the Library Historical Society, and Senior Center?
Sure. So you can see the people we met with, and basically I gave them an update on the facilities planning survey results and kind of our next steps with our next meetings. And I think the thing might be a little different with that meeting was we talked, they're applying to become a senior-friendly community. There's a designation for that, I don't know what it's called at the moment, and they are asking for involvement from the school district in terms of participation by students and planning and programs that they can do to make Shorewood a more senior-friendly community. We also talked a bit about the ongoing reading race series and the race work. It's not race works in that case. It's the collaboration with the library on the presentations that are being done there that are for the whole community, and our deep interest in continuing that. So we'll continue that.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? So I guess what kind of support do they want? Is it like, are they putting together an application? And
Yes,
okay.
basically they're putting together an application, and I think the sense is they need to name partners. There's
okay.
yeah, it's just involvement. Is that your understanding as well? Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next linkage, as we and Joanne were there, you guys will see that we talked about there's some concern about safety in front of SIS and in terms of the traffic, which I guess has been brought up before. There was, I think one good idea that came up right away was that we could use the driveway, above by the track. Yeah, it could be used as another place for drop off, and then maybe putting in some signage. And then the principal joint's gonna talk to and see if there's other things in the village that the village would be willing to do, around maybe like a crosswalk block or something.
Has that gotten worse in some of those communities? Has it gotten worse with people avoiding Oakland and using side streets? I'm wondering, I know the village has taken some steps to take that part of Morris off.
I don't think they were able to do that, but living on Morris, I can speak a little bit to it. They put up a no turn on red on, Morris. People are getting better at not turning on red, so that slowed down just a little bit. A neighbor of mine went ahead and purchased like 50, signs that, drive, like, is it your like your kid lives here. Like your kid lives here, and they had them in just off the road on the parkway, and then a few days later they got letters from the village saying they weren't allowed to have them there, so they were. I noticed a huge decrease in speed when they had them. It's not scientific, but once they got moved back to the lawns, it's back to normal. So it's a.
Well, the issue is speed bumps and everything, the village has said they won't do that, because the public works.
Yeah, that just won't work in that space, so. I mean, I think, it sounds like Mr. Joint's gonna look into it and then issue some more communication to parents about other alternatives to drop off, and then, I mean, the issue that, Amy Gilberti was bringing up is really about students not paying attention, so that's also like an education piece.
Well, but even seeing, summer school and seeing that traffic drop off and speed of people and all those things, I think that, that's a dangerous condition.
And that's a age that's really hard to, right, I mean, my middle schoolers, when they were that age, whatever, they walk in front of the bus. He was to remind the kids again and again and again, and
Just difficult. And then I think the other piece in there was some of the things that came up tonight, just talking about the ways of actually working with district, some suggestions that I think were all brought up again tonight, which is around social justice, curriculum that's more reflective of the students, the idea of having a youth working up the elementary schools, and so, those, I think we can come back around to when we talk about next steps, so. Okay, and then the high school?
high school. It was Hillary and I, and, I have to remind myself with, right, I don't know why my mic isn't working tonight. So we started with, that was the day after the election, I think. So we did a little, we were all still kind of like, what? So we did a little summary of what really happened. Talked a little bit about the election, some of the issues that conceivably might have in terms of hopefully changing the lens through which we look at school funding and how we fund our public education system, et cetera. And then we did the same thing, talked about the survey, the results process. And then it really was, at that point, led a lot by the parents who wanted to talk about, Tim talked about the new think space that's being created at the wall soon. And I think there was a lot of conversation about why. Talking about how they think that use their cards, this is all post school, we have a swipe card. That, they had showed it in the 6th grade, and suddenly they were being asked to fill the card, and, food flying off the shelves, and the pod is the biggest hit, and it's really just created awesome environment so that's a good positive. And then there's contest going on amongst the high schoolers to name this new big space, so they're doing a little competition for naming students. And then, we did a little bit of a summary of some of the things related to, you know, this equity and diversity group that Brian talked about earlier. That was also.
Yeah, and Ken did, a question came up about the new final.
Oh, that's right.
Arrangement, and that, I think was maybe a good explanation. Parents need to appreciate and understand the explanation. So taking from the first meeting this evening and that conversation. You're right, just the communication and needs to improve. So wait, so what is?
So there was there was a time where finals used to be 3 days, and then it was, you know, you come and go as you had exams, and some places had exams, some didn't, it depended. So I think there was and then if I'm misrepresenting this portion, there was a collective discussion amongst the teachers and the administration and principals to say, let's talk about how we do assessments, particularly end of the year assessments, and are they appropriate, and are we doing them consistently in the same way across departments, so that if for example, can use the example, if I have twins and twin A is in this math class and twin B is in that math class and they're the same math class, does this one have a final exam and this one doesn't? Because if so, that's not okay. So they talked about it from both a pedagogical, what's the purpose of the assessments that are used, and then making sure there's continuity within departments about how we're doing it. So they've made some changes to where there are project-based pieces or, you know, summative assessments versus, you know, just different kinds of assessment tools based on the subject areas and what's most appropriate. And then also being mindful of in some of the classes, like for the seniors who've taken an AP test, they're not gonna have a math. If they're taking AP calculus or taking an AP test, they're not gonna have a final in math, because really, why do they need to do that when they've just done some of those kinds of things? So there was some work done about both trying to lessen stress and be more purposeful and effective in terms of why we're doing this kind of assessment.
So eliminating the exam reflection.
Oh,
So-
yeah. And
So
then,
everybody will have to do some final thing
Yes,
for every class.
right. Every
But
class has
it's not
some,
necessarily
it's
an
not
exam.
necessarily an exam.
Or a,
Right, and exam exemptions, which were a one-time very beloved thing in Shorewood, are going away because they have found them to be more stress-inducing than beneficial. Because people are, you know, oh, I'm this far away from getting an exam exemption.
Everybody has to
Everybody
figure
has
out
to do it.
all
Everybody has to
day,
do
every
this
3
stuff.
days.
Nope, they don't, they're still taking the come and go format, but it's, you know, how they're structuring the process. So, it was interesting. Okay. And you did a very nice job of explaining it, much better than I just did.
okay. All right, and so, we have 3 more languages this week. Tomorrow is elementary school in the evening. Thursday is, parents of color, alumni of color, parents of youth of color. And, Friday is elementary school in the morning, so. We can report on those the next week. All right, and then the last thing under, board governance is a reminder that there is a school board election happening on April 2nd, 2019. There will be 2 seats available. Incumbents are Joanna Pazovic and Hillary Boyce. The incumbent notice is non-candidacy, which is required by 5 p.m. on December 21st, 2018. The final date for filing nomination papers is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019. And we will be hosting, the school board will be hosting a candidate interest orientation at 6 p.m. on December 11th, 2018, down in the conference room. Yeah, so invite anybody who might be interested. No obligation, just come and hear a little bit about what it's like to be on the school board, how it operates, so hopefully people can come to that. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to figure out where we are on this agenda. Okay, and so then, now we're on the board consent agenda.
I move that we approve the board consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to thank Steve for their generous donations to the school district.
So does this include the donation for the sink to sink? No.
No,
That's separate, yeah, okay, yeah, that's very nice. Okay, public comments number 3. Okay, so, review of to-do items. I'm gonna let you start then.
Did we?
No,
nothing. Go ahead.
So, for me, as I mentioned earlier, as part of the report, is just making sure that we're getting work done at the student level, at the teacher level, at the community level. So we'll continue to work on that as a follow-up to the study. We're going to check on the number of households, because certainly if we didn't get to the maximum number of households, then we'll have to talk about a solution to that, because that would be important. And then just making sure that touch base on the policy development, make sure Tim and Patrick are there as part of that process.
Okay. And then, one of us should touch base with the woman from the Office of African American Affairs.
Yeah, from Nicole, yeah, I have her contact.
Oh, you have a contact?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess this, you can just CC me on it.
Sure.
CC me on that. Okay, so I'll schedule another meeting for us to work on our policies. And I guess, Brian, I think for the board, I'd also like to hear, something that, I feel like there's a lot of suggestions in this report, in the African American Study report. And so if there is a way for you to kind of organize, I know you've talked about the different things that staff and students and teachers are doing, but if you could organize it around what these recommendations are and get it back to us, and so that we can have a sense of like when these things are happening, who's involved, how's involved.
Where there might be gaps in what we're doing.
Yeah, and just so that I can see where some of these things are getting addressed.
Sure.
Okay. So maybe bring that back at the next meeting.
Yep.
Because I guess I could put this then, but I do think that the point about urgency and, I mean, I agree with the journey, but it shouldn't be a journey that has already been in the process of 20 years and 30 years. So I think we need to, I'd like to see some action steps that we're taking that we can like come back to as a board and say like this is what's happening. Okay. Okay, any other things that I missed? Okay, and then future agenda items?
I had a rec, advisory meeting last night.
Okay. Okay.
We had an HRC meeting
Okay.
recently.
Okay, I'll put those on there for next time.
We attended.
Okay. All right, thanks, good. Somehow we managed to get back on our schedule. We are recessed again.